It's had about a day to set up, so now I'm going to go ahead and pressure test this and find out if we've got any leaks. Well, it looks like this is sealed because it's been sitting here for a while and hasn't lost pressure. So once I take this tester off, then I got to focus on getting the engine, the 103cc, out of the scooter so I can take some parts off of it to put onto here. I'm not sure if these are the EBC brakes I got or not, but whatever they are, I have never seen so much brake dust inside of a wheel before when I've taken it off. Let me get you a better look. Hopefully you can see it is just piled up in here. I have never seen brake dust come out like that. There's a example, and it's falling all out of here. You can see how much is stacked up here, how thick that is. At least aside from the amount of dust, the shoes actually look fine. I don't see any issues there. I'm thinking perhaps it's an issue from the powder coater, because when I had those wheels powder coated, they sandblasted them and it had a really rough finish. You can see anywhere that they didn't coat over again. They did coat over my liner there, the drum inside the wheel, for some reason. Then I just sanded it down. I don't know if maybe it still was left behind with a rougher surface than I realized, and it just ate the pads or what, or shoes. But at this point, I'm probably just going to reuse everything because my brakes worked fine. And just hope that goes away and it was just from the very rough surface at the beginning or something. Now I need to mod the header for the piece pipe just a little bit. It's got the spring hook here on the side, but it would actually work better if they were on each end, if there was one on each end here. So I'm going to try to cut this off and hopefully I can reuse that. And then that used to be a 99-cent barbecue forks handle. It's, I guess, a little over 1/8 inch thick steel, and I'll bend that into a hook as well. It's ugly, but it should work. And now I'm just going to run it over some sandpaper on glass just to make sure the flange is actually flat. I didn't screw anything up here. There's what that looks like now. I'm going to mount this on the engine. I'm going to use this NCY gasket. It's got a 30mm inside diameter, and I'll just coat that with a little bit of ultra copper. So I've got that just barely finger tight, and then I can reach up there and feel how the gasket is aligned, kind of move that into place. And then I can go ahead and tighten it up. That went easier than I expected. Got good clearance back there with the tire. And not exactly a lot of room, but it does clear the center stand. Now I'm going to install the stator and the wood rough key and the flywheel that I lightened earlier. Again, I don't have any fancy ignition. All this is a stock stator. It has been modified for full wave charging, and other than that, I've just slotted it here where the bolt holes go, and that way I can rotate it to advance timing. Here's how I've installed it, and if this bolt were all the way over to the left, that would be basically the stock ignition timing, and the further this bolt is in that slot to the right here, that's more advanced. I've still got room I could go, but I think it's going to take a good bit to get to 20 degrees. I'm not going to do any kind of checks here other than once it's actually able to start, then I'm going to try and see if I can get a timing light on there and actually see what the base timing comes out at. Normally I would install the water pump and the front cover right now, but because I want to check the ignition timing, I'm going to set up a timing mark on the flywheel here and a timing pointer. So beginning with a timing pointer, this is a piece of 1/8 inch steel bracket, I think a license plate bracket from the scooter, just ground to a point that I can bolt onto the case here. The reason that I don't use the typical paper clip here is because if I'm checking the ignition timing with the engine running, I'm afraid the paper clip can move around too much. It's not rigid enough to stay put, where this I know will stay put. I'm just going to tighten that down. It's not really that important exactly where it points right now, as long as it's somewhere close to the flywheel, so I'll be able to get a good reading. What I should have done was, when I had my degree wheel set up earlier, I should have installed my flywheel and my pointer, took care of that. I could have made my timing mark at that point, but now, since I didn't do that, I've got to set a degree wheel up again, or at least find top dead center, and then mark my flywheel so that it's got a mark for top dead center that aligns with where I put my pointer here. And that's just so I can check it with a timing light. So what I'm going to do is take my spark plug out, and I'll use this piston stop to help me set my degree wheel up instead of the stop that I showed you earlier in the video that went across studs. I don't want to take my head all apart and everything, so I'm just going to remove the spark plug and use this as my stop, and then I can set my degree wheel up. I'll turn the engine over and make sure it does actually stop there. I get a stop there. I get a stop there, so that does work. And now I'll set my degree wheel up just like I did the first time. And again, there's full info on setting up a degree wheel in the description. Now what I'll do is set this wheel right to 0 degrees, top dead center. Then I can spin the engine around so that I can make a mark for top dead center over here. So I'll just double check that my wheel is still on 0 degrees, right on top dead center. Then over here I'll make a mark on the flywheel that corresponds with the tip of this timing pointer here. And finally what I like to do is just to get in a position similar to what I'll be in when I'm actually reading the timing later, and make sure that that mark looks like it corresponds to the pointer when I'm in that position. Because if you put your head way over here or way over here or up or down more, it can change your perspective enough that this doesn't look lined up. So I try to get it to where it looks like it's lined up to about where I'm going to be when I'll measure timing. And if you want to be more accurate, or try to, you can scribe or etch a line like down the center of this marker here, so you can really see like a pinpoint of where it lines up. I don't know that it's going to be quite that accurate anyway, but you can do it if you'd like to. And what I'll do is put a T right here on the front of the flywheel, so I know that that is my top dead center mark. Now this part you don't really need to do if you have an adjustable timing light, which I do have, but if you don't have an adjustable timing light and you want to check timing this way, what you can do is move this to 10 or 20 or whatever marking you want degrees before top dead center. So if the engine is rotating this way, then over here will be before it reaches top dead center. So since I'm setting to 20 degrees, hopefully my ignition timing, what I can do is align this with 20 degrees before top dead center. And now you can see that my top dead center mark is no longer aligned. If this engine were rotating normal operation, it would go this way. So you can see that that is before the top dead center mark would come around if it was rotating this way. So I can go ahead and make a mark here that aligns with that pointer again, and I'll know that that's my 20 degree mark. Again, I'll check my perspective on it, make sure it still looks like that from where I think I'll roughly be when I'm reading it. And then what I can do is make a small 20 marking there, so there's absolutely no confusion as to what I'm looking at, aside from the fact that this kind of looks like a 6. So now with both of these marks, my flywheel is set up so that it could work with either kind of timing light. Again, I have an adjustable, so I don't really need this 20 degree mark, but I just thought I would show you while I'm at it. And it's not a bad thing just to double check anyway. So again, if it's an adjustable timing light, what you'll probably want to do is have the top dead center mark, adjust your timing light to say 20 degrees of advance, and when the timing light is set at 20 degrees of advance, it should line up with your top dead center mark. If you don't have an adjustable timing light, then you can't set it to any amount of degrees of advance. It's basically just going to be flashing wherever it's zeroed here with this. So if you only had this mark and it was at 20 without the marking on 20, you would just see that it wasn't on your top dead center mark, but you wouldn't know exactly where it was. So this way, if you have a non-adjustable timing light, if you set it up and get this timing pointer to align with this 20 degree mark, then you know your timing is set on 20 degrees. So now I can remove my degree wheel because I'll be done with that. And before I do, I'm just going to go ahead and reinstall my spark plug, but this time I'm going to put my temperature sensor underneath of it so it's ready to go when it goes in the scooter. Next I'll be setting up my CVT, and I'm going to be using parts from my other engine, the 103cc, because I just can't afford to buy 2 complete overrange transmissions. So this is my rear pulley and clutch, the aluminum Molossi or Molossi, whatever, rear pulley torque driver setup. This is actually a stock clutch with mild modifications for lightning and some stiffer clutch springs. And then a Hoka clutch bell that I've used for years. Basically a stock clutch bell, but it does have some knurling in here, which is now wearing out, but it's been working well for me. So I'm going to start by setting this up. And before, or anytime you're mounting an overrange pulley, rear pulley especially, to these engines, first thing you want to do is just put that on there all the way up against the stop, and make sure that can rotate freely and it's not running into your case, because sometimes, depends on the case and the pulley, it will run into like these little nubs that stick out here, or it can even hit the edges here of the case. So you want to make sure that that's not happening. And luckily for me, that isn't an issue with this one, so that'll be a pretty simple setup. I just want to grease the center here, and then I'll go ahead and install that. Usually a little washer is included with these Melosi OR kits. It goes right in there, just before the clutch bell, and then the clutch bell can go on, and the clutch nut. I'm not liking the feeling of that clutch nut very much. It doesn't seem to want to start very easily, so I think I'm going to go ahead and replace that while I'm in here. And that's much better. I do have a Melosi overrange variator that I've been using on my 103cc, but the issue is that engine has the larger crankshaft here and different spline count, so I need something for the smaller crank. And you can get a different drive boss, a different adapter, different fixed half, different key for the variator, etc. But at that point, with the cost, it's just as easy pretty much, and similar price, to just go ahead and buy an entire variator kit for the smaller crankshaft here. So that's what I did. And along with that, I also picked up a Naraku variator shim kit, because I've always used a 1/2 millimeter shim on my overrange kit on the 103cc, and I assume this will probably need something similar. There's a part number on the variator kit just in case anybody needs it before I toss that out. Before I set anything else up, I do want to see if I can find the 1/2 millimeter shim in the Naraku kit here, and there is the part number for that. I believe there was a slight discrepancy in either the inside or outside diameter of these relative to the diameter of the drive boss that comes with this. So I will double check that as well, make sure everything fits well. And that actually appears to be a very good match for the Melosi drive boss there, so won't have to do any modification. It does indeed slide over the crank. It doesn't have a lot of play, so that should be a good kit if you're looking for shims for your overrange variator. Check out that Naraku kit. This comes with a bunch of rollers from Melosi, but these are all most likely way too light for me, and I prefer Dr. Pulley sliders. So for right now, I have a feeling these are going to be too heavy, but I'm going to use my 10-gram sliders that were in the OR kit with my 103cc. And I don't think the 86 is going to make enough torque to make use of such heavy sliders, but we'll see. And now my 1/2 millimeter shim. Again, I don't know that that works well with this kit, but that is what worked well with my other kit all the time. So I'm just going to stick with that for the initial setup and hope it goes well. It may not, because I'm going to use my used overrange belt here. This thing is down to about 16.4 millimeters from 18. So not ideal. It should be replaced soon, but I'm going to try and get whatever life I can out of it, because I think my first rides are just going to be short test ride kind of deals. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this for those. And then the Woodruff key, star washer, whatever you prefer to call that. So if I can get that lined up with the splines, maybe. Alright, let me try this by itself. Alright. And that does not want to go on. So I've either got an issue with this or an issue with my crank, or they're just not compatible for some reason. I did actually pick up a Naraku key here as a spare. Again, there's the part number if you need it. So rather than spend much time messing with that, I'm just going to quickly see if that other part will bolt up or slide on. And that goes on with no trouble. So I'm not exactly sure what's wrong with the Malossi piece without further investigation that I don't really want to do right this second. And then I'll use everyone's favorite method here. I'm going to use my impact gun with a torque limiting stick and a 17mm socket. And I know a lot of people hate that method because they only want you to use a torque wrench. I've used that exact setup for a very long time, and so far it hadn't had a lot of trouble. On the flip side, I've used just this for a while before I got the torque limiting stick, torque stick, and I stripped all kinds of threads. But this is a 3/8 inch 30 foot-pound torque stick. Set this big gun to 90 psi, and that has worked very well for me for the variator, the clutch, and the flywheel on these engines. Just before my CVT cover goes on, I'm going to install these dowels. One goes here and one goes down here in this corner. They just help to locate the CVT cover. I like to put a drop or 3 of red Loctite on there just to help hold them in place, keep them from falling out. With the CVT cover installed, I've realized I've got a problem here. If I turn this engine over by the flywheel, you can hear that I've got contact in there, and I can clearly feel it. And at first I thought it was the Kickstarter gear there and the starter pawl that's attached to the crank, but actually I think they are passing each other okay. They're tight clearance, but I believe they're passing each other. And I'm seeing marks on the fins of my variator that I think line up, it looks like, with the tip of a spring under the cover. So once the cover's off, you can pretty easily see there's been contact right here in the center of all of these cooling fan fins. And then that lines up with this end of the kickstart spring here. And you can see it sticks up a little bit above the kickstart gear. So I could try to cut that back a little bit, just grind a little bit off there and see if that was enough to work. I'm kind of afraid to grind too much off of that because I don't want this spring to slip off. So what I've done is I've left the stock Malossi spacer in place back there, the one that comes with the OR variator. And then I've bolted up their ram plate and the drive boss with the help of a few washers and the starter pawl. And then I've taken these feeler gauges that are kind of bent at the end here, because flat feeler gauges didn't seem to work well. They kind of wanted to follow the ramp and give me false readings. But these I can get in there kind of straight on and check, which I doubt you can really see that, but I can kind of get in there this way between the ramp plate and the engine case here, and it looks like I've got something like 1.7 to maybe 1.8 millimeters of clearance back there. And I wouldn't want to take all of that off because I don't want it extremely close to the, definitely don't want it to touch the case, but I don't want it extremely close to the case either, just in case there's any kind of side-to-side play there at any point. But I think I am going to take this spacer out and try to take, if nothing else, maybe 0.7 to 0.8 millimeters off of it, and hopefully that'll leave about 1 millimeter of clearance there, and then I can see if that's enough to fix the problem that I'm having. I don't hear or feel any issues with that now when I turn the engine over. And I can't really show you on camera, but I can also look in there and see that there's a little clearance between that pin and the fins on the variator, so should be good to go. So I just went and dug out one of the last parts, and that's the carburetor. This is a Del Orto PHBL 25, so a 25 millimeter carburetor. For some reason I thought I had a 24 and a 25, but I only see two 25s. Same thing basically anyway, not much difference there. Been a long time since these have been used, so I'm going to go ahead and take this apart and put it in the ultrasonic cleaner get it good and clean before I use it. Carbs cleaned, back together now, and while I was at it, I've done some upjetting to a larger pilot jet, a larger main jet, and a thinner needle, because the last time I was using this carburetor, I was having problems with it always running rich, so I'd been trying to lean it out, and I definitely don't want to start this with the leanest settings that I can get. Now I've got to move this gremlin bell, because I'm going to try to use this air box. It's a modified stock air box, kind of remote mount, and it mounts right up here where the bell is right now. These are plugs. I used to have uni filter vents in there, but when I took the reed block apart last time, I found one of those little filters inside of my reeds, so I don't really want that in there. So these are just aluminum plugs I made up on the lathe, so it's basically back to more of a stock airbox configuration. But I do have the inlet here enlarged. And if you've been around the forum, you've probably heard this story 100 times. But while I know the pod filters and bell mouths and all that kind of thing are very popular with most people trying to build a performance engine, I prefer to stick with an airbox of some sort. My first experience that really changed my mind was years ago when I built a 103cc that would rev anywhere from 10 to 12,000 RPM. The thing was really finicky. I could get it in tune one day, and then the next day it would be off again, and that just continued for a while, and I got really tired of messing with it. And what I did was I ended up making this airbox setup. Again, at the time it did have filter vents here for even more flow, but I made that up and installed it, and what it turned out to do was I had no loss in performance, no gain either, to be fair, but I had no loss in performance. But once I got it in tune, I didn't have to mess with it all the time. I'm not saying it wouldn't have to be adjusted periodically because of weather or something, but it wasn't like day to day I constantly needed to retune it. It wasn't so picky. So I've been a believer in the air boxes ever since then, and that's what I'm going to try to go with this one and hope it works out.